hit the record button right. Because I know posters may want to refer back to this. So, it is great to have you all here. We are on the topic tonight, diabetes. Where is the sugar? Diabetes, where is the sugar? And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome to our Sunday night. We are here every night. We'll be looking at a different health topic and natural remedies to reverse it. So, before we begin, let us just bow our heads for a word of prayer. Invite the Lord's presence. Bow your heads with me. Dear Father in heaven, we want to thank you, Lord, for the privilege of going into this message. We want to thank you, Lord, for your natural healing methods. We want to thank you, Lord, for the ministry of healing. And as we go through your remedies tonight, we ask, Lord, that you may inspire us and that you may give us the power to live them out so that we can gain the benefits promised. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen and then we'll jump right into it. So if you can see my screen, give me a 1 in the chat, just making sure that we are all live and fired up and ready to roll. Once those ones start coming in, we'll start the presentation to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Just go in the chat and give me a 1, and that way I will know that you are seeing the screen and we are there. Okay, so we are there. I am seeing the ones coming in. So tonight we'll be looking at diabetes. Where is the sugar? And listen, it's a lot of information. We'll see if we can get through it, which is why we try to make sure we start on time. I assume or I presume this will take we should be finished here about 8:30. And for those of you who know someone with diabetes or is suffering with diabetes yourself, stick around to the end. We're going to give you the flyer, the handout of all that we'll be talking about here tonight. So we got to start right way. Of course, disclaimer, this webinar is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Now, for those of you who are new here, we teach primarily from 3 sources, and then there's the 4th one that is added there at the end. Now, the sources are, first of all, the Bible. The second one are the inspired writings. When we talk about the inspired writings, we are talking about the inspired writings of Ellen G. White. And then the third one is good science. Now, what is good science? Good science is what lines up with the Bible and also inspired writings. And the 4th one, of course, experience. There are things that you will see from time to time on the field, working with clients, working with patients. And so we bring that in here. Now, our key text, of course, will not change because this is the marching order right here. And it's taken from Exodus chapter 15 and verse 26. That's Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. If you have your Bible, you can turn there and we will read it together. It says, "And the Lord said, If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee." So we see here, just like everything in the Bible, the Lord will fulfill his promise as long as we do our part. There are certain things that we have to do, and the Lord promises that once we do those things, he will do his part. Now, Proverbs 26, verse 2, part B, says, "The curse causeless shall not come." The curse causeless shall not come. And of course, by now we have memorized this, taken from Ministry of Healing, page 127, excellent book. And it says that disease never comes without a cause. Disease never comes without a cause. Now, that is a very powerful yet simple statement. Why? Because if we understand that disease never comes without a cause, it means that if we understand the cause, then we can possibly reverse the disease. And then it also would help us to understand that in actuality, there is no disease that is incurable. As long as you understand the cause, then that disease can be cured. Now, let's get a working definition. We got to start this thing off right. And we're going to get a working definition for disease. Now, this is really going to be very important. It says that disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. And there are some words that are highlighted there that I want us to really home in on and pay attention to. And we're going to use this as we go along. So The first one is disease. Now, this is the end result. So the end result, disease, came about because nature was trying to free the system. Now, the question must be asked, why was nature freeing the system? If nature was freeing the system because there were conditions that were developed. But how did these conditions come about? By a violation of what? The laws of health. And so the question now, the next question we have to ask is, what are the laws of health? Now, as we see here, pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness or temperance, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power, these are the true remedies. And I like to use this little diagram here. In fact, I have a video for you tonight, so I'll put it up shortly. But let's just go through it first of all. So just like we discussed, disease, that is the end result. Now, most of us focus on the end result, but that didn't just come about there because we saw earlier that it never comes without a cause. So let's do the lineup. So disease came because the system was freeing itself from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. And this is really important. In fact, let me jump right over to that video right now. And I think it did a brilliant job at explaining it. In fact, let me give a special shout out to my editor, Johnny and John, for editing that video. So let's go ahead and watch that video right now.
It says that disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. What are the laws of health? Pure air, sunlight, rest, temperance, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. Now, these are the 8 laws of health. So, as long as these laws of health are in place, everything is fine. Now, as soon as you violate, you're going to start a chain of events. So when there is a violation, the formula says that conditions develop. So as soon as you violate the laws of health, your body will start developing conditions. That could be coughing, sneezing, wheezing, whatever the case is, conditions are going to be developed. It could be elevated or higher than normal blood pressure, higher than normal blood sugar readings, hormonal imbalance. These are things that can start to develop. So now, if nothing is done here, the system is going to fix the problem and it's going to try and free itself. So that's called system freeing from these conditions that have developed. Now, if you leave that unchecked, eventually a disease is going to develop. That disease could be hypertension, it could be diabetes, it could be PCOS, it could be fibroids, any of those diseases, and many others could develop. Now, check this out. How did this chain start? It started from a violation. Instead, what we do, we give a drug medication to treat that condition, and here's what happens. Now, a drug medication is administered, new conditions develop, the system then tries to free itself from those conditions, and a new disease is formed. Then we give drugs to fix that disease. So what happens? A new condition is developed. The system then tries to free itself from that condition, and then now you have a new disease developing. And that is why when persons start drug medication, they will start with one issue, but then develop 3, 4, 5 and different issues from just one initial issue. You did not get sick because you were lacking any drug medication, cough medication, sneezing medication. You got sick because there was a violation. So let us fix this. So if we break the violation, the conditions will go away, the system will have no need to free itself, and the disease will go away. Now, where do herbs come in? Let's build it back up. Once we break the violation, then we can now introduce herbs here to help to deal with the conditions. Condition goes away, to help to deal with the system freeing, and eventually the disease will go away. But your problem was not a lack of drugs or a lack of herbs. Your problem was a violation. So before you start any sort of disease reversal, if you do not plan on stopping the violation, then you will just build this massive chain of more conditions, more system freeing, more diseases. And this is a principle that I want every single person to get, because once you learn this, then it becomes easy. But if you do not plan on breaking the violation, then nothing we do here would make any sense.
All right, so I think that is very clear. So now that we have that there, we're going to jump right back over to the slide and go from there. So I really like to start clients off with this because it kind of highlights the fact that if you don't plan to change anything, you will be a very good client for the drug company or even the herb company, because you'll just be buying herbs, drugs after one after the other, but there will be no relief and no resolution of that situation. Right. So now that we have that, let us begin the actual presentation. So what diabetes versus sugar? Now, there are a couple of things that we have to lay down. There are some groundwork that has to be placed there. So let's read this together from the screen. 2, 3. It says the first thing to be done is to ascertain the true character of the sickness and then go to work intelligently to remove the cause. Makes sense? If the harmonious working of the system has become unbalanced by overwork, overeating, or other irregularities, do not endeavor to adjust the difficulties by adding the burden of poisonous medicines. Now, what should one do if they're sick? In the case of sickness, says again, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions should be changed. Wrong habits should be corrected. Then, nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. The use of natural remedies, now here is where most persons fall off the boat. The use of natural remedies require an amount of care and effort that many are not willing to give. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences require sacrifice, but in the end, it says, it will be found that nature, untrammeled, does her work wisely and well. Those who persevere in obedience to her laws will reap the reward in health of body and health of mind. Now we're going to get some working definition. We're looking at diabetes tonight. There are some terms that you will hear. And so before we actually go into, the full thing, we got to get a definition of what we're dealing with. So what is diabetes? Diabetes occurs when the body becomes unable to handle glucose, or sugar as it's called locally, which builds up to dangerous levels in the blood. Now, a point must be noted, there will always be sugar in the blood because the blood uses sugar as the fuel to carry out its daily activities. But when it's a diabetic situation, it's when it becomes dangerous, just like even a car. There is only a limited amount of fuel that should be in the pipelines or in the fuel lines at a set period of time. When that pressure goes above, we have dangerously high levels. So now we know diabetes. The next term you will always hear once you're dealing with these presentations is something called insulin. How much of you have ever heard the term insulin? So let's see what insulin is. Now, insulin is a hormone made by the pancreas. And don't worry, we're going to bring this thing right down to a third grade level, right? It's a hormone made by the pancreas that allows your body to use sugar from carbohydrates in the food you eat. Insulin puts this glucose from your bloodstream into your liver or muscle cells to store it as glycogen for future use. Insulin keeps your blood sugar from getting too high or too low. Now let's break this down. Let's just break it down into simple language. So remember we said that there is always sugar in the blood. But if it is not regulated, it can change levels either too low or too high. So what this insulin hormone does, let's look at him as a very helpful little fella that keeps the body in check. He just makes sure that those levels are not too high and too low. And really how he does it, all of the energy that you consume via food is really going to one place. Anybody know what that place is? The cells. So the cells is where all of the energy goes. So there are cells in your muscles, cells in your organs, there are cells in your skin, cells in your brain. So all of these organs are made up of cells, and the cells is what utilizes energy and causes the organ to do that specific function for which it is designed. So what insulin does, it makes sure that everybody or the energy is rationed properly and make sure everybody has their count, right? So pretty simple. Now this is what the pancreas looks like. If you look at the image off to the left, you will see exactly where it is. It's just above your breast or chest line, and it is underneath your liver. And this is the pancreas that we are talking about. Now let's really kind of show you here via this diagram how simple it is. So blood glucose, that would be like the meter in the blood to register what is the normal levels. And once those are normal, things are running well. So when you eat food, let's go from the meal. You guys can see the mouse. When you eat food, it is digested, specifically from the stomach, it goes to the intestines, and then glucose is released. Now, once the glucose is released, the body then, or the insulin, is sent out. And what insulin does, it takes the excess glucose and sends it to the muscle and also to fat cells. Let me break this down even further. Think of it like this. Your muscle and fat cells, well, let's do the muscle first, the muscle and the liver, right? These are like your wallet or your purse if you're a female. So money will be the insulin, right? The purse or the wallet will be the muscles and the liver. Those are short-term energy stores. Those store energy for short-term. Now, your purse and or your wallet has a limited supply. There's only so much cash you can put in there. And the rest of the money comes from the ATM. Now, in theory, the ATM has an unlimited supply. Any amount of money can be placed in the bank and you can take it out via the ATM. So this is really how it works. When the blood sugar levels goes too low, then insulin says, hey, we need to release back, or we need to put some money back into circulation. So it goes to the short-term energy stores first, which will be your liver and also your muscles. These are where you get the quick release of the glucose that you need. Now, once you blow through these, or once you burn these out, then it goes into the fat cells. So the fat cells will be the ATM, then and only then it will go there, right? Now, before we continue, because this is a teaching class, if that makes sense, give me a 1 in the chat. If you need a next explanation, give me a 2 and I will work at it again. So let me look at the ones. This is an interactive class, by the way, right? So if you plan to sit and just watch or listen, then get your fingers activated, because we need to make sure that as we go along, everything is making sense. So if it makes sense, give me a 1 in the chat. If it does not, we'll just go over it again. Okay, perfect. So I see the ones coming in. Lovely. We're building. Now, as we mentioned, insulin is like an usher. And what it does, it opens the doors of the cells to put glucose in. So remember we said the ultimate goal of energy, the ultimate goal of glucose is to the cells of the body. So when insulin is activated, it goes, it opens the cells, and it says in sugar or glucose, you guys go ahead, and then the cell uses that for energy. Now, keep this in mind, because it's going to come back very handy when we start to look at the real cause of elevated blood sugar levels, aka diabetes. Now, how many types of diabetes are there? Let me just put this out to the group. How many types of diabetes you know? Put them in the chat. So we're going to put in the chat how much types of diabetes you know. Let me see what we're working with here. All right, so there's type 2, right? Let's see what else comes out here. So I'm giving you guys 1, 2, 3, 4 Mississippis, type 3, type 2. Okay, so I'm seeing 2 and 3. All right. Let me see if there's any more. That is 1, 2, yes? All right, so mommy says type 1, type 3, type 2. Okay, lovely. Let me see here. Zimran. That is Sister Maureen, good to see you. Good to see you. And I think I see Natasha here as well from Trinidad. Good to see you. We have 2 new. Okay, so we see them coming in now. We have 2 new persons joining us tonight. Very good. Good to see you guys. All right, so type 1, type 2. All right, so let's look at it together. So there are categories of diabetes, and then there are types of diabetes. So there's water diabetes, and then there is sugar diabetes. Now, don't worry, we're not going into all of these tonight. We're just going into the main ones. Let's focus on the type. So there's type 1 diabetes. Now, this is also called juvenile diabetes. These are the ones that babies are born with, right? Some babies born, they have type 1 diabetes or juvenile diabetes. Now, there's type 1.5. This one was new to me. And then there is type 2, and then there is also type 3, right? Now let's work on some terms and definitions. So let's look at normal ranges, pre-diabetes levels, and diabetes levels. So A normal range when you do your blood sugar reading is 65 to 99 milligram per deciliter, or if you're using the mmol per liter, it is 3.6 to 5.5, right? Now, for pre-diabetes, fasting blood sugar levels, now let me highlight this. What does fasting blood sugar levels mean? It means that when you take this reading, you would have taken it after a night of not eating, right? So your last meal was, what's the time now? It was 7 o'clock. You go tomorrow at the clinic or you go tomorrow at the lab and you take your blood sugar 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. That will be considered a fasting blood sugar level. Why is that important? Because if you want to take your blood sugar levels right after eating, then it will automatically be high. And if you didn't know better, you would think that you have prediabetes or diabetes. But that is normal because once you eat food, the sugar breaks down and it will have an original or an initial spike there, right? So let's just put that there. Now, so when we do a fasting blood sugar level for prediabetes, when you're hitting numbers of 100 to 125 milligram per deciliter or 5.6 to 6.9 after an 8-hour fast, then you realize, okay, that might be prediabetes level. And then diabetes level, this is when the doctors actually diagnose you as a diabetic, is when you are taking fasting numbers of 126 milligram per deciliter or above 7, right? In a fasting number. Let me stick a pin here. Now, my preferred method, and some other health professionals I've spoken to, is the HbA1c as opposed to the blood sugar test. Now, why the HbA1c? The HbA1c test, and you can just ask the lab for this, this takes a 3-month and 90-day period average of your blood sugar levels and then gives a reading. So unlike the blood sugar reading, which takes it at that instant, this takes an average of over 3 months, 90 days, and then it gives you a reading. So this would be a more accurate reading in terms of if you are really pre or diabetic. So if you had done a reading and you saw higher than normal numbers, providing that you didn't eat or anything, just for confirmation, you could request it from your doctor or you could go to the lab yourself and ask them to do a HbA1c test. HbA1c, yes. Right? And that will be a more accurate number. Right? Now, we're building. Now, we're going to look at something called beta cells. And this is going to come in as we go along. Now, what are beta cells? Beta cells are the insulin factories of the body. So, we know what insulin does. We know which organ it is made in. Now, we are finding out exactly which cell makes the insulin. So, if the insulin cannot be made, then we would realize that there will be some issues at hand. Now, as we read, it says, if the immune system destroys them, diabetes can occur. Let's go again. Cow's milk protein resembles protein found on the surface of beta cells of the pancreas. Individuals with milk sensitivities or allergies may begin to make antibodies that attack these lookalike proteins on the beta cells. Now let's break that down into real life language. Right? I'm going to jump right down now to type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, these are the ones that the babies, born and they have type 1 diabetes. Now, I want you to pay attention to this. It says that the beta cells make insulin, okay? And we know that insulin controls blood sugar levels. Perfect. Nothing is wrong there. Now, if the beta cells gets destroyed, it means that there is no insulin being made by the body. It also means that the blood sugar levels will be terminally high. We have a condition called type 1 or juvenile diabetes where babies are being born without the ability to naturally control their blood sugar levels. But there is something that is said here. It says cow's milk proteins resemble proteins found on the surface of the beta cells of the pancreas. So what you find happening, let me bring this picture up. Baby calves needs its mother's milk. We agree with that. Mother's milk is best for babies, or humans' milk is best for human babies. So what happens, especially in the case of juvenile diabetes? What is the formula they give children from a young age? Lactogen and these milk-based formulas. So these milk-based formulas are made from cow's milk, specifically casein. And what happens when it is introduced into the body thinks that it is a anti or something that is not supposed to be there. So it starts attacking it. But as we read here earlier, guess what else resembles those proteins? The beta cells. So not only is the body attacking the cow's milk, it is also attacking the proteins on the beta cells. As a result of drinking those formulas at a young age, some babies have their insulin manufacturing facility totally destroyed, as a result, resulting in type 1 or juvenile diabetes. Right? So that is really where juvenile diabetes comes in. So just something there to note. We talked about this already. Now let's move to diabetes 1.5. Now this one is pretty interesting. It's called latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, or late onset autoimmune diabetes of adulthood. Now, another way you could call it is a slow onset or slow manifestation of diabetes. And it says here that 5 to 20% of people diagnosed as type 2 were found to be type 1.5. So type 1.5 is you didn't have type 1 where you had a juvenile diabetes, but later on in your life, you develop that same autoimmune condition. And of course, we know where that autoimmune condition can come from. Again, the body starting to do things that it was not designed to do because of foods that are being introduced. Right? Now, here are some of the characteristics of latent autoimmune diabetes. It produces insulin at the start, so everything starts off pretty normal. However, what we notice is that people with latent autoimmune diabetes do not require insulin for the first 3 to 6 months following a diagnosis. So even though they have been diagnosed with diabetes 1.5 or LADA, we'll just call it LADA, the first few months, they don't require insulin. However, up to 80% will require within the next 5 years. Naturally, they will have high blood sugar levels, high sugar levels. They will have positive antibodies to destroy beta cells, but it doesn't destroy them all at the start. And of course, there will be a damage to the insulin, right? So with this one, it can initially be controlled with meal planning, with or without diabetes pills, as we mentioned, because you don't need insulin for the first few months. The average age for this one, though, is an age greater than 30 years. So 30 years or older, this is when you will tend to see this one coming on an individual. And these are not fat persons. These are persons with a more slender physique. And they would show some level of insulin resistance, right? And they're unlikely to have a family history of type 2 diabetes. So nobody in the family will have diabetes. However, after the age of 30, will start to display or start to manifest type 1 or diabetic responses when they do their tests. Now, this pin has to be stuck in here. Since the inoculation of 2020 COVID vaccine, we have seen a lot of strange things like this and worse at younger ages. So what we are giving you here was pre-2020. After 2020, since persons took the COVID-19 vaccines, we are seeing some strange things in every disease. So you will notice that every presentation we do, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, PCOS, fibroids, there will always be a special mention of the effects of the vaccine, because the effects of the vaccine has definitely changed how the body responds. Right? Lovely. Now, causes of diabetes type 1 and type 1.5, again, as we said, immune reaction to milk protein, specifically casein. Some of it can be drug-induced, just mentioned that. A viral infection, vitamin D deficiency, iodine deficiency, gluten sensitivity, so persons who have like celiac disease or sensitive to gluten, or if they have destroyed or non-production of beta cells, which we mentioned, and other lifestyle factors. Now, let's talk about diabetes type 2. Now, diabetes type 2 occurs when the body becomes unable to handle glucose, which builds up to dangerous levels. That was the definition we started. Now, you can only be diagnosed with diabetes type 2 when you are having consistent readings. This is the key part, consistent readings. So you do it one time, you do it two times, you do it three times. After an 8-hour fast, and you're seeing 126 milligram per deciliter or 7 millimeter per liter, and that is when you will be diagnosed as somebody having type 2. We mentioned about the HbA1c rate. Now, type 3 diabetes. So, another name for type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's disease. And what you would notice, this is something I've noticed very closely. One is persons who has Alzheimer's disease typically has diabetes too. So they would have been treated for diabetes in the early years. Or when I say early years, I mean like the 50, 60 years. They tend to have diabetes with them as well. Right? So just something there to note. So diabetes type 3 is actually Alzheimer's disease. And this is where deposits of protein in the pancreas, which is similar to the protein deposits found in the brain tissues of Alzheimer's sufferers. Now, let me see something here. Now, cause of type 3, age, family history, Down syndrome, whiplash, and you will see why, whiplash and head injuries, aluminum and mercury. What are some unsuspecting sources of aluminum and mercury? Fish, the childhood vaccines, so the normal childhood vaccines, these are some sources of it, paint, and some other skin chemicals that we put on could cause this as well. Gender, heart disease, processed foods, and fertilizers. Right, there is something I need you guys to pay attention to. So I'm going to show you something interesting. Now, let me ask this question. Do you know, let's do some recap. Which organs in the body produces insulin? Let me look in the chat. Which organ or organs in the body produces insulin? Let's look in the chat here. Okay, let me go. Pancreas. That is correct. So the pancreas produces insulin. Do you know which other organ produces insulin? The brain. So you learned something new tonight. The brain also produces insulin. Right? Then you will begin to see the link between the Alzheimer's and also being called the type 3 diabetes. So the brain also produces insulin. So in case you didn't know, now you know. Right. So we're building. So we look at the whiplash, which is why, of course, if the brain is damaged, it means that the insulin production capability has drastically reduced. Right? So now there we go. All right. Lovely. We can skip through these. These ones are pretty straightforward. So tonight, we're going to focus really on the type 2 diabetes. We're going to focus on the type 2 diabetes, and we're going to really get down into it. Now, remember we said earlier that the purpose of insulin is to usher glucose from the bloodstream into the cells. Right? We said that earlier. And we also realized that notwithstanding the fact, let's assume for this one that the body can produce insulin, the beta cells are not affected because we're dealing with type 2. There is only one other reason why the body will not be able to put insulin or put blood sugar inside of the cells. Let's look at it together. Now, I want us to read some things together before we actually get down to it. So I'm going to give you a little excerpt of something that happened. The guy's name is Dr. Anderson. What Dr. Anderson did is that he was able to turn lean. I want you to pay attention to this. Lean means the person is not fat. Muscular, perhaps, but definitely not fat at the start of this experiment. So Dr. Anderson was able to turn lean, healthy young men into mild diabetics in less than 2 weeks by feeding them a rich 65% fat diet. Okay. A similar group fed a lean 10% fat diet plus 1 pound of sugar a day did not produce even one diabetic after 11 weeks when the experiment was terminated. All right, so I could see the confused looks on your face. So one of them eating tons of sugar, but low fat. And after 11 weeks, not one case of diabetes. What's the topic? Diabetes, where is the sugar? However, And next set, no sugar involved, but all they did was bump up their fat by 65%. And the result, they in 2 weeks began to become mild diabetics. All right. We're going to leave that as a cliffhanger for now. We're coming back to that. Now, if you have done any of these presentations in the past, you would see this image. What is this image? This image is lifespan of human beings pre-flood and post-flood. So pre-flood, we have fellas living 700, 800 plus, 900 plus. These were the average numbers. Post-flood, as you can see from the graph here, a rapid decrease. Like immediately post-flood. The highest number post-flood is not even the lowest number pre-flood. You can see it right there. What is my point? The question must be asked, what happened post-flood? So we know vegetation got destroyed, okay? The place get flooded out, okay? They have high stress because the whole world just get destroyed, but that happened before. In a sense, not the world being destroyed, but they have been being stressed out. So what is it that happened post-flood that never happened pre-flood that would have caused this? Simple. If you look in the account in Genesis, I believe it's Genesis 7 or 8, you would see that because of the flood, human beings were then given permission temporarily to eat flesh foods. Heretofore, they ate fully plant-based. After the flood, because every vegetation is destroyed, they had a temporary provision to eat animal food until the vegetation got restored. Then we see a massive drop in their health. So, these are some of the foods that they have eaten. And what you would also notice is that animal foods inherently are high in fat. But that's not the bad part. High fat is not bad because in the sense of chia seeds has fat too, flax seeds have fat, soybeans have fat, all of these have fat. What is the difference? Avocado has fat, nuts have fat. What is the difference? Animal foods have fat without fiber. Plant foods have fat with fiber. What fiber does? Fiber buffers everything and takes the excess out. So if you actually look at this experiment that Dr. Anderson did, you have to come to the conclusion that, again, diabetes type 2 is caused primarily by a 65% high-fat diet, fat in the body or fat on the body. Why does that happen? You can't just put statements out and can't prove it. Now let's go back here. These are two cells, a normal cell and a person with diabetes type 2 cell. We said that master diabetes or master insulin is the usher. He goes with the key, open the door and puts the sugar inside the cell. Right, lovely, nothing wrong with that. However, we look at these two cells and realize that the normal cell is accepting the insulin properly, but the diabetes cell has a yellow ring outside. What is that yellow ring? That is the buildup of fat. As a result of the fat being built up, when Mr. Insulin goes to the door, push the keys and try to open, that fat blocks it. So he cannot put the sugar from the bloodstream into the cell. As a result, there's a backup of sugar in the bloodstream, which is why Mr. Man Anderson, Dr. Anderson, was able to turn lean, healthy young men into mild diabetics by just feeding them a 65% fat diet. And the other group with plenty sugar and low fat did not even produce one diabetic. So the only thing that was different there was the amount of fat in the diet. The fat in the diet blocks the door. Insulin cannot put sugar in. As a result, blood sugar goes up. So we have to ask, what about sugar? Well, here's what happens with sugar. Sugar produces additional calories in the body. Over time, this is important, over time, excess sugar equals excess calories. If you have an account and you're getting more money than you're spending, what happens to your account? Let me see in the chat. We're going to use money. Everybody understands money. If you have an account and you are getting way more money in that account than you are able to spend. What happens to your account? Let me see in the chat. You got to get back in the chat. And you fell asleep there a little bit. Hopefully not. Right, let's get back in the chat. What happens to that account? You are getting way more money in that account than you are able to spend. What happens to that account? That account begins to grow. The exact same thing happens in your body. When you eat more calories than your body needs to survive, your body does the same thing. It stores the excess for rainy days. Guess where it stores it? As fat. So what excess? High calorie food. Well, the question was asked any kind of food. I'll answer that question shortly. So excess sugar. Sugar is generally high in calories. When calories goes up, the body stores it as fat. Over time, you become obese. When you become obese, it means that the fat levels in your body goes up. It also means that the fat levels in the cells goes where? Up. And when the fat levels in the cells goes up, what happens to the cells? The cells become, same story, resistant to insulin and excess blood glucose that will be found inside of your body. So going back to Mr. Anderson, Dr. Anderson experiment, if you had taken this from 11 weeks to 11 months, then you would have seen probably mild diabetics starting to form, because they would have been long enough for them to start gaining some excess fat, which will also put the excess fat in the cells and then will cause that situation to happen. Lovely. So we build in and we are growing now. Insulin resistance. So what is insulin resistance? Insulin resistance, just think of it as insulin resistance means the cell is not able to get the sugar from the blood into the cells. Sorry, the insulin is not able to get the sugar from the blood into the cell. That is called insulin resistance. And these are persons who are at risk for insulin resistance. If you had recent stress or trauma. Let me explain this one. This one also goes into why sleep deprivation would cause your blood sugar to go up. So picture this. You are walking down the road and out pops an aggressive looking vicious pit bull. Right. Your body realizes that danger is ahead. Now, again, keep your fingers close to this chat. You're gonna answer me some questions. Your body realizes that, hey, danger is ahead. Now, the two responses that your body normally do is what? Keep your fingers on the chat. What are the two responses? Correct. I heard one in the back, fight. What is the other one? Flight. Correct. So fight means you're going to fight your way out of the situation. Flight means you're going to run. Right. Keep your fingers close to the chat. If you are about to do any of these, fight the dog or run from the dog, what do you need? What do you need your body to produce? Energy. Correct. And lots of it, because you're about to do something dramatic. So what your body does, going back to this liver story, your body sees this, right? Adrenaline and energy. Correct. Your body sees this, adrenaline is released. When adrenaline is released, a little bit of cortisol is released. Let's just call these stress hormones. Let me just use simple words. Your body sees stress and your body says, hey guys, load me up with energy because we have some action ahead. As a result, insulin is released. Insulin taps on the liver, say, hey, send out all of your short-term energy stores, muscles, send out energies, pour them into the blood for me. Right, now the blood is primed. The body is ready. Let's say in this case, you decide to not be a hero and go and fight the dog like Samson, but you decide to be a very smart person and jump the wall. Right, so you jump the wall, danger is alleviated, the body realizes we are safe. Adrenaline gets shut off, and cortisol gets shut off. Those are just the stress responses. So the body says, hey, we're safe, everything is back to normal. When everything is back to normal, because you have gone through that experience of running from the dog, that energy that was pumped into your bloodstream got used up. And the signal to produce more has been shut off. So everything is back to normal. Perfect. Everything good. Story done. Now, what happens in the case of stress? I want you to memorize this. Your body cannot differentiate between real stress, aka a dog in front of you, or perceived stress, something that just stressing you out in your brain. So your body can't tell the difference if it is a real stress or a perceived stress. Now, here is the danger with stress. Let us say you have rumors that you are about to be laid off. On top of this, you have a big mortgage, you have a child in school, paying a student loan, and you're kind of behind in your bills already. And they say, hey, the boy have something coming, they're gonna lay us off. They're gonna lay us off. Now, what does that induce in your body? Stress. The exact response happen. Your body starts to pump the hormones for stress. These hormones start to tell the body, prepare for something. These now tell insulin to start letting out blood sugar in the bloodstream. The only difference is there is nothing to use up the sugar because this is just in your brain. You haven't been laid off. There is no physical exhaustion that will follow this. And imagine you're doing this night after night, day after day. And the more stressed you are, all your body is doing is just pumping sugar, pumping sugar, pumping sugar, pumping sugar, and you are having nothing to use up the sugar. So what happens? These levels start to become higher and higher and higher, and insulin now becomes overworked. The cells door can't open and close as they should, and then you start to find your body having insulin resistance. The same thing happens when you burn the midnight oil consistently. Make sense? If it makes sense, give me a 3 in the chat. Let me use a number we never used before. If the thing makes sense, give me a 3 in the chat. Right. So that is really that is one of the major dangers of stress. And for those of you on a weight loss journey, you may find that you are losing weight, everything going on nicely, all of a sudden you stop losing weight. If you check and you see that you have like some stress in your body does the same thing. So what your body will do, your body will be like, hey, mamzelle, stop losing weight because right now we have stress. We need to preserve energy. So instead of releasing fat cells, instead of burning that up, it's trying to hold on in case this situation doesn't get resolved as soon as it should. Right? So that was just something for those on the weight loss journey. So sleep, when nighttime come, go and sleep right through the night. And if you have stress, there's only 2 types of stress you have. Really and truly. Things that you could control and things that you can't control. If you could control it, you turn the stress into energy and go and control it. If you can't control it, leave it to the Lord in prayer. Right? I know easier said than done. Right. So let's go again. So we're looking at persons who are at risk for insulin resistance. As we mentioned, stress, trauma, overweight, physically inactive, obviously. Having a parent or sibling with diabetes, obviously. Family background. These persons tend to be at risk for insulin resistance. African American, Alaskan Native, American Indian, Asian American, Hispanic or Latino, Pacific Islander American. Right? Also persons who have an exposure to toxins of the blood and glucose, who has high inflammation, so think arthritis or other like diseases, beta cell death as we just mentioned, giving birth to a baby weighing more than 9 pounds. So if you have a big popo, a big bambino, then yes, that those persons tend to be insulin resistant, and they also have gestational diabetes, especially some persons when they are giving birth to baby, their numbers go up. And there are multiple reasons for that. If you had their gestational diabetes, if you have a high blood pressure, and the reason for the high blood pressure is that the high blood pressure is controlled by the, what are these called right above the kidneys, right? There are two organs above the kidneys that control the blood pressure. The kidneys also filter the blood, and if these are overworked, then the kidneys become overworked. The kidneys can't filter the blood that it should. When the blood is impure, inflammation goes up, and as we see before, as inflammation goes up, insulin resistance goes up. Right? High cholesterol, if you have PCOS, and this is one that's always baffled me. So when persons have PCOS, they normally put them on metformin. I've never understood that, but beside the point. Having prediabetes, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose intolerance, and the likes. Right. Now let's pick up the pace now. So symptoms of diabetes: weakness, fatigue, tingling sensation in the extremities. Why? Because the nerves begin to get destroyed. And the nerves are what sends these sensations of hot, cold, pain, etc. And if they are getting destroyed, they are now sending wrong signals. That is why you will have tingling sensation. Blurred vision, dry and itchy skin, itchy around the genital areas especially, and that's because of the accumulation of glucose. You would also have burning sensation and acanthosis nigricans. Hope I pronounced that right. Acanthosis nigricans. Yes. Right, let me show you what it looks like. So this is how I normally, if I'm walking in tongue, I could tell persons who probably have diabetes. So if you look at around their arm, around their neck, you would see like black spots. Let me show you some. On the fingernails, right? Look at the screen. So these are some, this one is very pronounced. Like you look at the hands, you look at the neck, you normally see this. Look at the neck area. This yellowing of the toes. These are some of the symptoms of persons who have diabetes, right? Some other symptoms would be polyuria, which means they always want to pee. Then there is polydipsia, which means they're always thirsty. Polyphagia, which means they're always hungry. And these are some of the symptoms, right? I think we covered that already. Oh, this is important. So if you have type 2 diabetes and it goes untreated, these are some things that could be created or be worsened if you leave it untreated. Eye disease, which we are all familiar with that. You know, persons going blind. Nerve damage. Kidney failure. So these two always go hand in hand. Anytime somebody have diabetes, especially if they're running insulin, after a couple of years, the next thing that starts to go is the kidneys. Kidneys become overworked, they can no longer keep up, and they start to fail. Arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries, which will lead to the next one, which is heart attack and strokes. So remember we said earlier, and this really is by leaving a disease to progress or treating it as your main method with drugs. Drugs has its place. If you're in an accident, you get in a car crash, something goes through your body, there are certain drugs that will work faster than herbs, and they are good for acute conditions or conditions that require short-term treatment. Right? They have their place there. But for long-term treatment, reversing diseases, drugs do more harm than good. So this is some of the results of that, right? For the male, sexual impotence, hearing impairment, leg cramps, gangrene, which is what causes persons to be amputated, especially if they're diabetic. And then ladies, you are more prone to breast and uterine cancer. Now, what is the form of treatment typically given for diabetes? First form is normally metformin. Now, here are some of the side effects of metformin. Acute infection of the nose, throat, sinus, taste problems, head pain, feeling like throwing up, gas, diarrhea, stomach cramps, swelling of the abdomen, inadequate vitamin B12, which creates a whole new problem for you, trouble breathing, inflammation of the nose, indigestion, fingernail or toenail disease, muscle pain, dizzy, flu-like symptoms, excessive sweating, chills, rash, temporary, heart throbbing or pounding. This is what it always amazes me. If somebody has PCOS, why do you give them metformin? I'm sure there are other ways which we'll look in future lectures and there are ways you could treat them, right? These are some of the other drugs that they use to treat it. And then there's also insulin, which most persons are using. Right? Now let's look at this. We got to read this. Too little attention is generally given to the preservation of health. It is far better to prevent the disease than to know how to treat it when contracted. By the use of poisonous drugs, many bring upon themselves lifelong illness, and many lives are lost that might be saved by the use of natural methods of healing. This is important. Drugs never cure disease. Let me say that again. Drugs never cure disease. They only change its form and location. When drugs are introduced into the system, for a time they seem to have a beneficial effect. A change may take place, but the disease is not cured. It will manifest itself in some other form, as you guys just saw in the video that we did earlier. The disease which the drug was given to cure may disappear, but only to reappear in a new form, such as skin disease, ulcers, painful diseased joints, and sometimes more dangerous and deadly form. Nature keeps struggling, and the patient suffers with different ailments until there is a sudden breakdown in her efforts and death follows. Right. We have got the theory out of the way. Now, let me put this in the chat. Do you guys want me to go through the healing protocol or do you want me to do it next week? Let me give you guys the option. Do you guys want me to go through it this week or want me to go through it next week? It will take us about 30 minutes. Maybe less, but yeah. See, I know you guys had a handful, so I think we should put it up for tonight, and then we will go into the healing next week. Fair enough? I don't want to overwhelm you. And don't worry, I've recorded this, so it will be available for right. Perfect, perfect. I agree with you. I agree with you. So next session, we're gonna now look at the actual natural remedies and treatments to help reverse diseases. Right? I'm gonna look at it, and we're gonna take our time and go from there. So that being said, let us get ready to close off in prayer. Let me just make a quick check here. Right, let's get ready to close off in prayer, and then we will pause the session for tonight. Let me hit the pause button, and we'll pick it up next week. Right, so let's just stop the recording. Let's see, where is my record?